Hello, my name is Catherine Moore, social worker, mom, coffee lover, and founder of Social Workers Rise, where we inspire social workers to connect, expand their knowledge, and change more lives than they ever thought possible. I'm so excited you found my podcast. We will talk everything social work on every level from micro to macro. We will hear the stories of social workers who are doing big things, learn new skills, and most importantly, give you actionable steps to make a difference today. Let's go. Before we hop into this episode, it's important to acknowledge that being a new grad and a new worker can be really hard sometimes. It's not in your head, it really can be hard, and grad school just doesn't teach us everything that we need to know to be successful in the real world with our jobs. So, in order to bridge that gap, we created the Clinical Essentials for the Future Therapist. This course will fast track you into honing those skills that you need to actually help your clients in an individual setting. It'll save you time when you're trying to figure out what the heck to document. It's going to increase your confidence in your abilities that you are doing this right and give you the tools that you need to be even more effective. And it's going to improve the professional quality of your notes so that when your colleagues and your coworkers read them, they say, wow, that's a really thorough, detailed note. I love it. Let's do this. And it provides clarity on how to help the person. So if this sounds like something you would benefit from, definitely check the link in the show notes for the Clinical Essentials for the Future Therapist. With that, let's hop into this episode. Hello, welcome to another episode of Social Workers Rise. This week is so much fun because we are talking with Sarah Dooling, who is a official play therapist, and she's going to give us insights into how to work with teens who are experiencing, the effects of this pandemic, how to work with them, also how to work and support their parents, and what are going to be the long-term effects that she thinks that we should expect to see. Also, she's going to cover how you can also become a play therapist. If that is something that you would like to know more about, definitely listen in. Let's get into it. Hi, Sarah.
Hi, Catherine. Gosh, this is amazing.
Yes.
I'm totally amazed.
Yes, I know the magic of podcasts.
Right? Well, hello.
Hello, how are you today?
I'm good. I am loving Fridays as we do.
Yes, me too.
Mm-hmm.
So I am excited to dig into this with you today. So you are a play therapist.
I am.
And you actually offer play therapy workshops. I love that.
Ooh, that's my favorite part of what I get to do. I'm so glad you love that.
Yes, because I feel like everyone loves play therapy. Like we all love to play, and even though it's geared towards kids and teens, which is what we're going to talk about, like play therapy works with adults too, even older adults. From what I've had in my experience. Have you seen the same thing?
I love hearing you say that. Yes. I was just speaking with someone about this in supervision. I think that going through the credential process to become a registered play therapist super, super duper informed my practice with adults. I think it really helped me internalize that message that like in play therapy, we say that we are the most important toy in the room. You are the most important toy, whatever interventions you're using, if you aren't able to show up in that way. And of course that we know that translates with adults. So I think it just really helped me become a more like person-centered therapist for adults, which which I'm grateful for. And I do actually bring in some straight up play occasionally with my adult clients.
That's great. I know that everyone's going to want to know, how do you become a play therapist?
Another one of my favorite questions. Well, gosh, if you had asked me this 2 years ago, it would be different. I say it like I am the association, but they've recently changed the requirements. So to become a registered play therapist, you have to have a master's degree and a license in a mental health field. So you have to be a licensed clinician. However, you can start working towards your credential while you're also working towards your licensure. And then it's 150 hours of coursework in play therapy theory and special populations. There's a bunch of really awesome providers who are putting out those workshops now. Plug, I'm one of those providers. And then if I can plug myself there, and then it's 35 hours of like specialized supervision with a registered play therapist supervisor. It's gonna just be another plug, but also my other favorite thing to do.
Yeah.
And then it's like the same way with our license, we have to do a certain amount of clinical hours. So it ends up being about like similar to what you're asked to do for your license. So yeah, and it's 5 observations. Your supervisor observes 5 sessions, virtually or in person, and but it's a beautiful process. It can feel like it takes a long time, but it just was such a game changer for me. I really feel like it just saved me and made me fall in love with the work all over again.
That's amazing. So, if I'm hearing this right, can we become certified in play therapy as we are acquiring our clinical hours for licensure?
You can work towards it. You can't apply for your credential until you are actually hold a license in a state.
Okay. I understand. That makes sense.
So some people do it concurrently, people who really have their act together. I did not. It wasn't until after I got my license that I kind of stumbled upon it. But I supervise a few people now who really have timed it so that, excuse me, as they're pursuing their clinical hours, they're also going to classes every weekend from play therapy and kind of doing it at once. That to me, it's a lot of pressure and a lot of planning, but it's possible. But you can't actually submit your application until you're licensed.
Okay, that's great to know, because I know our listeners, they're on if they can do all the things at once, I know that they will, and they will at least want to know what their options are.
Yes. And I mean, the Association for Play Therapy website is a great resource for all kinds of things. Certainly anyone, if I can point you in the right direction, I'm always happy to answer questions about the process. It can be, I think, daunting to read the website over and over. And if you just have like a human, you can run a question by here and there. It can be really helpful.
That's great. Thank you so much for that. I'm going to put your information in the show notes. That way people can get in contact with you. But what I really want to talk about is, very timely right now is, how do we support children and teenagers through all of the changes that have been happening in the past year related to the pandemic and COVID-19? Because it just seems like everyone, parents that I talk to and teenagers especially that I talk to, is their whole life has been flipped upside down. Teenagers, and I think maybe specifically about teenagers is what I'm curious about, but because their whole life is friends and social connections. And I've heard from multiple people that they're concerned that their child is becoming depressed because of having to stay at home. So I'm just curious, what do you think about all that? Is it possible that they could be becoming depressed? Like, could that trigger depression? How do we support them? What do we do? Please help us.
I'm going to give it my best. I do think we're seeing that. I think we're certainly seeing, like, I think we're always reluctant as social workers to pathologize. And this is exactly why, right? Because you have all these wild environmental variables that come in. And of course, then we're seeing symptoms of depression and anxiety. And it's just like, I feel like so validating as a social worker. Like we always knew this stuff is really environmental. And then of course, how do we treat it? But yes, absolutely. I am working with people. I know colleagues who are, where it's, kids and teenagers who weren't exhibiting any symptoms like that. And that wasn't their temperament, and then 6 months in, 8 months in, 12 months in, yeah, they're starved for connection, starved for play, all of that. So yeah, it's looking like depression. I agree that that's what we're seeing. But then I think for our question and our I guess what is posits to us then in the mental health field is, so how are we going to coach parents, really advise parents, support parents, because of course they are the ones who have access to their kids, right, for 24 hours a day now.
Mm-hmm.
And how are we going to support in the mental health field? I think it's going to look so different than it did pre-pandemic in terms of the kind of counseling we're going to do.
Right. So I guess we can kind of split it up into two ways. How do we support parents? And then there might be some of us who are asked to speak with the children because of these behavior changes. If we are a school social worker or maybe a hospital social worker where someone has come in, really upset about the changes to their social life, how do we support parents, one, and
Mhm.
then as social workers, like what are some techniques or tips or maybe even some games or interventions that we might be able to play with the youth to just open up that conversation and start to build that rapport and that trust.
Yeah, okay, I gotcha. So the parent piece, and then yeah, really kind of getting into it um with the kids, with our actual work. So okay, I'm gonna start with parents if that feels okay to
Yeah.
you. So I feel like there's this whole new niche in the play therapy world. I'm just branding this right now. I don't know if anyone else has branded this, of like pandemic parent support. Like this parenting looks really different. Like you said, everything's been turned upside down. What's also, as many of us have talked about, like as providers and clinicians, we are experiencing, these kind of same environmental stressors, not exactly the same for each of us, but in terms of the pandemic that our clients are, and that's like somewhat unprecedented. Um, so I think, and I know you'll be a big supporter of this, like the first thing that popped into my mind is clinicians have to be taking care of themselves. We have to make sure we're finding ways for ourselves and our peers, our social work family, to put our oxygen masks on, because you are like, we're just holding space and holding space and holding space. um, so that I think is just was speaking to me as you were talking. um,
Yes.
and I know you're always supporting everybody with that. um, in terms of the parent piece, I really think parents need, every human does, but I think for me, parents especially really need to be seen and heard right now. I know it's kind of like I'm a broken record about that lately, but I hear that so much, from my friends and from, other people who I know, of like, it's like no one gets how much I'm doing. And that's how it feels, for all of us who are going through it, like from the minute your eyes open, right until you pass out, like you're juggling so many things that we never thought we'd be juggling. Um, so I am always just trying to find a way to just see and hear parents, just to give them like small doses of that. Um, of yeah, this is like nothing you've ever done. I have a supervisee who always says it's just like stress on steroids all the time. Um, and that's what parents are going through. And I think to be able to hold space for parents in whatever doses we can, I think when they're feeling seen and heard, it helps, them be better equipped to help their kids feel seen and heard. So if you're
Mm.
seeing them as a practitioner, or whatever your interactions might be, I think just doses of that, being mindful of giving doses of that.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point that you bring up because it reminds me of my work with caregivers because, like parents, they're doing all the things, like it's a 24-hour job, all the things, and it's every single freaking day, like day in and day out. You don't get a break. And when I would say something to the extent of like, I would reflect back about everything that they're doing, how strong they are, even if they don't feel like it. I see you and I
Mhm.
see you doing all these things. I see you holding the family together and I thank you.
Mm,
And just thanking them and showing that gratitude, like it brings some people to tears and they don't even realize that they're doing all of these things. And even if we just told them thank you,
mhm.
it would mean so, so much to them. So yeah, I really like what you said about just acknowledging everything that they're doing.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
and I think too, what I've seen is by listing out all of the things
Mhm.
that caregivers do, or I would imagine, same thing with parents. By listing out all the things that parents do, it validates
Mm.
why they feel so tired.
Oh, yes, it's bananas. I think they're so, gosh, I mean, so many parents are so hard on themselves. And I've had parents say, like, I don't know why I'm so tired. I don't know why I'm so irritable. And it's like, well, duh, let's write it all. I don't actually ever say that to a client, but like, let's write it all down. Like, because when you,
Don't say duh
I
to a
swear I
client.
don't. I mean, I hope I don't. God, maybe I do. Um, but yeah, I mean, it's just incredible. It is just a mind melt to me that people are balancing what they're balancing and then doing the kind of work people are doing. And to feel like we certainly have like vaccine hope now, right? But like to feel like for so long there was no end to this, and to have had nervous systems be in this hypervigilant state for almost 12 months, well, 12 months really, right? Like just the impact that has on how you move through the world is so great. So yeah, I think just really, handling caregivers and parents and siblings and everyone with as much care and love as we can when we get the opportunity to give them doses of that. I also really recommend, if parents ask me explicitly for like suggestions or advice, to try to I know not everyone has this luxury, but to find like a daily check-in person. I actually, this comes from my own anecdotal experience. My best friend in the whole world, we decided at the start of this, we were going to try to check in every day, which is like totally unreasonable to do by phone, right? If you're a parent and you're working. But we decided it would just be text. It could be like one word, but it was something to know that like this other human, like you were on their mind. And it was great. And then we would start to do like we were in different time zones. So like, what's your stress number? So, right. So like we would check in on that every day, and I see that she was a 9, and it didn't mean I could really do much to help, but I could like hold that, for the day. So it's become so hard, I think, for parents to, as it is for kids, to connect and to feel like they're a part of that support system anymore. So I think that to find who is your person who you could have a daily contact with, even if it's just, a one word text message or an emoji.
Yes, I like that. And I think it's even more powerful when it is your friend, when it's not the
Oh,
therapist, because
yeah.
that's a lot to put on us. If you're listening to this, don't think it has to be you.
Oh no,
Please,
it
it's
shouldn't be
better.
you. Sorry, that didn't come out. It
Yeah,
definitely
it's
should not
better
be
if
you.
it's not.
No, it definitely has to be like they're people. Like no, I did it with my best friend since elementary school, and I tried to get my sister to do it with one of her colleagues she's really close with. No, definitely not you. Thank you for clarifying that.
Because I know I like the listeners are so sweet and so genuine, and they literally will be that person. And so I'm giving you permission and like validation. It shouldn't be
No,
you
yeah,
because we need to encourage them to utilize their own support systems because us as the practitioners, we go on vacation, we have our
you
boundaries,
sure do.
we have spare time.
Yes, and you need to keep your oxygen mask on. And, right, like we're social workers, so we want to build capacity all the time, right? Work ourselves out of a job because we just want the systems to work so well without us. So, yes, definitely help them. I mean, I think we do a great job helping them brainstorm, like, hey, gosh, there's this one friend I've heard you mention a bunch in here, or here's this other person. Sometimes we've maybe heard sound bites that they aren't paying attention to. Um, but yes, so that's just one of like the interventions I'll encourage parents.
I love that. I love that. Thank
Hmm.
you. So, how can we help teenagers? Um, I have zero experience here, so please tell me how.
Mhm. Well, you were a teenager. We're gonna go off that. Sometimes that I feel like I know, right? That's like our most, although we didn't have to be a teenager during a pandemic. Um,
Yeah.
Yeah, so I thought a lot about this when you and I were first exchanging emails because I feel like I have to be transparent on here that like most of my play therapy work is with like kids under 10. However, I absolutely see teenagers in my private practice and have done, worked with schools for middle school populations. Um, I really believe in the healing powers of play, like you said, for all ages. And I think for middle and high school kids, for teenagers, um, we really have to work to kind of invite their inner child to come out, which always sounds like a little hokey when I say it out loud. Um, but I was thinking they're just in this tricky um, place where they physically present, right, as gosh, adults sometimes almost. And I think we end up having really unrealistic expectations, kind of the world around them based on how they look, and really like there's a 13-year-old brain and heart inside that body. So I think that therapists sometimes, from in my experience, and I have done this myself, I'm kind of like a little bit too nervous or self-conscious to bring in play, thinking like, oh, it's just going to be rejected right away. So I guess one of the first things I'd encourage is to, if and I can talk about more specific ideas, but if play feels good to you, and you believe in kind of the spirit of that and that work, to trust that I rarely have a teenager who isn't open to trying anything. And then it's so awesome, they'll just tell you if they don't like it. Um, so I would say one, to be open. I hear clinicians a lot say like, well, it's a teenager, so I couldn't use play. So I would say to just make sure that, you quiet that narrative if it's happening for you.
Yeah, I like that. Do you have any simple activities that we could do or use or that you found to be effective a lot of the time?
Would it be funny if I was like, no? Yeah, I do. I do. I swear I do. I do, and I'm wishing now. I maybe you and I can kind of find a follow up, because I'd love to be able to. I know it can be so helpful when there's a visual to go with this. Maybe I could get something to you too that would be helpful for people to see. Yes. So for Zoom sessions, okay. So just I'm going to try to, I know it gets so long-winded when I start talking about this. I mean, I think for me, unconditional positive regard and safety are, always right at the forefront of our mind. I think with teenagers, if we're cultivating that in session, we've done a really awesome job. I think the world feels really unsafe when you're a teenager. The world feels really unsafe when you're a teenager living through a pandemic. And I think almost all of the relationships in their lives feel conditional, right? Like the relationships with peers, which are the most important thing, are also really unpredictable. Lots of times there's kind of this tumultuous relationship between parents and family. So I do think I will come up with I have some specific ideas, but really focusing on cultivating safety and delivering unconditional positive regard, which is not easy to do over Zoom, but possible. So I use a lot of hide and seek questions. So when I would do this in my office, I would tape different like questions and feelings like in different places in my office. I really like having, kids and teenagers moving. And they would have to find them. So often they were the same questions, just ritual questions. We would start with like, what was the worst part of your week? Or, what was a time this week when you got through something really hard? Whatever your ritual questions are. And they would just be hidden. So to me, there's just like magically restorative, playful powers in hide and seek. Like I believe since the beginning of time, people have been playing hide and seek. And teenagers have always been pretty open to it when I've done this. So I'd like hide up between the couch cushions or, under the carpet. So what I do now over Zoom is I have just like a really big Tupperware, and I just put uncooked rice in one. I have one that's just a bunch of different like dried beans, just because that one's different colors. I like how it looks. And I have all kinds of little strips of paper that I have cut out and bagged by category. So like I have a feelings bag, I have a getting to know you bag, I have like a communication skills bag, with different. I'm happy to send you a bunch of sample questions too, if that's helpful for anyone to have access to the ones I use typically.
Yeah, I wonder if we can do, the week that we release this podcast, maybe we can do a face or an Instagram
Oh
live.
yes.
And I would love to see these little bags and jars that
Right.
you
Oh, I
have.
would, Catherine, I would love it because it just like pops more when you can see it. And
Okay.
I totally have gotten over my self-consciousness of like being all quirky in front of the screen like that. So I would love to, because I think it could be really useful if people can see. And it's all stuff that's really like affordable and adaptable. And, you can just have it at your desk all the time to be able to, if it gets, really feels awkward, right, for new clinicians, this can happen in quiet, like, oh, there you go. You've got your big rice thing with your different questions. I have a huge bag that's just would you rather. So that, right, like I'll mix in the would you rather ones with maybe some that are a little bit, a little bit more deep, just to keep it. So that's, I would say, my absolute go-to. So I have one that's rice. I have a kinetic sand one, beans, just to mix it up.
Cool. Yeah, I feel like that's super helpful and easy enough for us to do and integrate, into our work in whichever setting or population that we might be with, because it just makes it a little bit more fun and
That
spices it up
that's
and
exactly
get
it.
better.
And I just, when you get that inner child moment and that like kind of neck down moment, it's like such a sweet spot for a like relational experience. I just think it helps everything. Yeah, I use it in supervision all the time. We start with some kind of a supervision set. So yeah, and they're adults, and you see facial expressions change, people kind of lighten up a little bit. So yeah, that's been
Yeah,
my
I love
favorite
that.
Zoom option.
Okay, so we will, if, you're listening to this right now, you can go to my Instagram at Social Workers Rise, and chances are I'll have it scheduled out for that week. Or if this is later, you can watch the replay, in the Instagram stories or in IGTV. It'll be in there in my replays for play therapy. Thank you, Sarah. I have, one last question for you. It's more of a macro, large scale question. What are, given all of these changes and the teenagers that are like going through this, I can't help but think, what are the long term effects that we might be expecting to see on a society level? And I know this is purely like hypothetical, but, given your experience, what is your opinion on that?
Gosh, I thank you for that question. I think it's such an important one that I think is on all of our minds a lot of the time. Like, what will the ramifications be, kind of on a large scale, for our children of all ages? I mean, I think there's a lot of things that we're going to have to brace ourselves for, I think, in the clinical world. And that sounded ominous, but in terms of when we return, as like primarily I was a school-based clinician for 10 years. So when I think about the work that the safety that will need to be cultivated on school campuses, it's intriguing to me, because I think there's so many ways to do it, but I hope that stays a priority. I think, again, just people's sense of safety has been so kind of contaminated, and to me, like for kids, that's the most important protective factors. They feel safe. So I think there's just a lot of really creative work that will need to be done. I think so that's kind of in terms of like the school systems and school districts. I will be fascinated to see. I have a 4-year-old now, so she was 3 when we really got into this, and to see, she's a very social, extroverted child, but to see her now, if we're walking down the street and there's someone coming even far away, she'll say, "We have to cross the street, Mom." Or, like her mask was pulled
Mm.
down and she was like, "Mom, pull my mask up." Um, and that's gonna be, or she'll like hold her hands out, even if we haven't touched anything, right? And be like, "Germ juice." And that is somewhat intriguing, so a little bit worrisome, but also, it's what needs to happen now. So if you can remember back to any social work listeners who loved their human behavior classes, when we learned about the ecological model and we talked about like adaptability, it's to live through this and think about how, in terms of our ecology, we have all just found this way to adapt. In this kind of indefinite, right? If you all think back to kind of March 13th, and every week, right, every day we would check the news and say, is it done yet? Like, are we safe yet? And who would have thought, 12 months later, we would have adapted to this and been able to continue to, live our lives. And I think something that's a protective factor that will come out of this is what I've been hearing from parents and teachers is a chance to be home in although there was such a massive amount of stress, I was able to have this experience with my child and partner or siblings, whoever else is in the home, that like I know now I wouldn't have gotten. And I'm grateful for that time of us all being together. So that, I think in some ways it really has been able to strengthen family dynamics and family bonds. I also think my biggest hope is that we all will be able to really kind of like embrace living day to day. I really noticed that shift for myself. I don't know if you noticed that I had always been so kind of forward thinking and what was going to happen tomorrow and the next day and the next day. And that was for 6 weeks of the pandemic. Really, it was just, I'm going to get through today. And then when I wake up tomorrow, I'll figure out tomorrow. So my hope is that. I also think just flexibility and adaptability. I think that we're going to have generations of kids who are going to have be pretty strong in those areas.
Yeah, I definitely agree. Yeah, thank you so much, Sarah, for sharing all of that. It was a pleasure talking with you today. It was so much fun. Thank you for being on the podcast.
Thank you for having me, Catherine. I will look forward to our IG Live.
Yes. Where can people find you and keep in contact? Yes. And even
find me. I am so excited of discovering the world of Instagram, and it is so fun to meet so many awesome people like you. So I'm on Instagram at Heal with Play. And that's probably the fastest way. My website has all information about me. It's just sarahscottdooling.com. But Instagram is kind of where I'm at more often. So check it out. I would love to have you there.
Yeah, thank you so much, Sarah.
Thanks, Catherine.
We'll talk soon. Bye. Do you want to make your own podcast? Spotify has a platform that lets you make one super easily, then distribute it everywhere and even earn money all in one place for free. It's called Spotify for Podcasters. And this is the platform that I use because it makes it so simple to record and distribute your podcast all in one place using your cell phone. What you need to do is download the Spotify for Podcasters app or go to www.spotify.com/podcasters to get started. Thank you so much for listening to another episode of Social Workers Rise. If this episode helped you, please help me spread the word by leaving a review wherever you listen to your podcast. And share that you're listening. Tag me on social media. I love it. I will repost and reshare. I love it. Social currency is free, but it is so valuable. Also, I'd love to hear from you on Instagram. I really do respond. I really do love it when you give me your feedback. Lastly, this is not therapeutic advice or business advice or any other kind of personalized advice. To get that, you definitely need me as your coach. So please, again, reach out to me on Instagram. I can't wait till next week. I will see you then. All the love. Bye.